You may know the term UFO, which stands for something in the sky that makes your camera blurry. But today we'll be looking at the most famous and the most obscure UFO sightings, brought to you in yet another iceberg video on the internet by me, the only person who likes classic lays. We start with the most famous one, which is Roswell, obviously. In 1947, an object fell from the sky and crashed into a rancher's field. The official story says that it was a weather balloon, or weather balloon debris. And then people didn't like this, so they theorized it was aliens, or a Soviet spy plane, because of multiple things happening, especially the Cold War. But this is because Officer Jesse Marcel, who had been a part of recovering the debris, had made multiple accounts of believing in UFOs and that what he saw was quote unquote nothing made on Earth, and mostly because the story changed a couple times. Whatever happened, this specific sighting has the most debate around it. The Phoenix Lights in 1997 were a series of lights seen over the states of Arizona, Nevada, and Mexican state of Sonora. And this is actually two different events, which one was the Prescott Dewey lights, and two, the V-shape, which probably is the most famous one. Thousands of reports mentioned a solid object, and multiple pilots mentioned it was bigger than most aircraft that were flown at the time. The Battle of Los Angeles was a weird event during World War II, just after Pearl Harbor, in which the military randomly shot at something in the air, and then rolling blackouts and hysteria ensued because of the thought of Japanese paratrooper invasion happening. And however, in the morning when everything was over, no aircraft debris was found, and then this led people to believe that what they were shooting at was some sort of unidentified enemy that they couldn't shoot down, a UFO. The Pentagon videos were a series of released videos by the Pentagon in the year 2020, but three specific videos stood out among the rest. The Go Fast video,
Nickel 6-1 Tango, Smile J, over.
Oh, got it! Woohoo!
Roger, there's troubleshooting.
the Gimbal video,
This is a fucking drone, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west.
and the FLIR video. They were black and white videos taken by the US Navy, abroad aircraft carriers USS Nimitz and USS Roosevelt. And these are actually the most credible cases we have right now in terms of UFO knowledge within the government. Lastly, I just want to toss in Project Blue Book, which was the de facto UFO investigation group led by Captain Edward J. Ruppelt. And this was pretty much just a US government face for US or UFO investigations. It's actually believed that they were forced to look at less credible sightings just in case they found something that was an alien, so they wouldn't reveal it. Lastly, times two is Bob Lazar. I know this one's kind of not traditional, but Bob Lazar was a man who claimed to have worked at Area 51 and worked on UFOs. His claims go that these aliens or these UFOs would use different elements that aren't found on Earth, and that these pilots or aliens would come from the Zeta Reticuli system. The Black Knight satellite is a conspiracy theory of a alien UFO that's been orbiting Earth and is being covered up by Nazi Germany, I mean NASA. It's said that the Black Knight satellite is just space debris, specifically a thermal cover that became loose from the first space shuttle mission and just remained there. The McMinnville UFO photo is actually one of the most widely known UFO photos and the most credible, at least one of the most credible. There you go. These pictures were taken by Evelyn and Paula Trent when they saw a UFO outside their home in the morning, and this specific incident has gone back and forth between being real and being fake more than any other photo has. The arguments are, it's a model hung from wires, specifically telephone wires you can see in the picture. The UFO appears in the same spot twice in both pictures, so people were skeptical. And shadows don't match the time of day that the UFO was reported. However, some of these claims were proven wrong, right? Like the picture actually shows some distance between the wires and the UFO, and cloud conditions can cause shadows. So, the Chicago O'Hare Airport incident on November 7th, 2006 was a incident in which a UFO was spotted by airport employees, including pilots, mechanics, and airline management. However, air traffic control said they never saw anything show up on their radar, and the Federal Aviation Administration actually denied investigating this because they had no evidence, because there was no one or nothing found on the radar. So they just straight up declined this. But witnesses say that the object in the sky was a dark gray disk and that it was silent. And one witness says that the object left at a high velocity, leaving through a blue hole in the clouds. And then the official explanation is that it was just weather phenomena. Because, of course, the Kenneth Arnold sighting is actually regarded as the first modern day UFO sighting. And Kenneth Arnold was a pilot who encountered 9 UFOs flying at 1,200 miles per hour on a flight by Mount Rainier in Washington, USA. Arnold actually took a detour from his actual flight path to recover a crashed transport aircraft because it had a reward. So, homie just went for money. But then after that, he didn't find it, and then he came back, and then that's when he saw the UFOs. He said he saw them flying in a long chain, and actually multiple reports of these UFOs started coming out around the exact same time that Arnold reported them. And then this incident actually coined the term flying saucer, but then was completely overshadowed by Roswell happening a couple months later. The 1952 Washington DC UFO sighting, also my favorite UFO sighting. It's known as the Big Flap. There's a vagina joke in here. Find it. But UFOs showed up over the White House and caused mass panic in the US due to the belief of a Soviet invasion, and air traffic control had actually joked about it being a flying saucer when they spotted the UFOs at first, but then once they passed the White House, everything just kind of stopped. Like the jokes just kind of stopped. Eventually, 2 interceptor jets got close to them, but the UFOs would just speed away. And then this incident is actually super disorganized because a Project Blue Book was sent in, and when this happened, Project Blue Book was notified of this, and then when the leader, right, Captain Edward J. Rubel, tried to go in, he was denied cab fare. He was denied interviews with air traffic control personnel, radar operators, all of that. He was just denied doing his job. The Air Force actually decided to give the public an easy explanation before investigations even started, and eventually became known as a cover-up. Not a UFO cover-up though, a cover-up of the government not knowing what they saw. The Men in Black are a theory of men dressed in black suits who claim to be part of the government, who tend to harass, threaten, or even sometimes kill those who have been witnesses to UFOs. You know them, they were popularized by Will Smith. The Kecksberg UFO incident, which is known as Pennsylvania's Roswell, was an incident which reports of fireballs over 6 US states, and other reports came in that mentioned an object that was bell-shaped or acorn-shaped with ancient hieroglyphics. The official story is that NASA stated it was fragments of a Soviet satellite, and that after this, NASA themselves lost the records of what actually happened. But at the time, the Air Force searched the woods where it's said to have landed, and they didn't find anything. And then later, authorities came out and said it was just a meteor. NASA was then sued on behalf of the Freedom of Information Act and released open-ended documents. And then this has just led to speculation that NASA This has led to speculation that NASA is either incompetent or this is a cover-up. Speaking of NASA's incompetence, during a live stream from the ISS, a UFO seemed to approach the Earth, and as it stopped, NASA cut the feed. YouTuber StreetCap1 posted a portion of what happened, and NASA has argued that it was space debris, window reflection, or lights from Earth. That last one is obvious. Of course it's lights from Earth. Just look at it. The Belgian UFO wave from November 1989 to April 1990 were multiple reports of a triangle-shaped UFO It peaked in March when radar managed to pick up a UFO and 2 Air Force pilots searched but nothing was found. But then 143 reports were made over the next 2 weeks about this triangle-shaped UFO happening again. In April though, a photo was released by a man known as Pentagon in which people thought it was real. For 20 years, people thought this picture was real, and then Patrick came out and said it was fake. The picture at the time actually caused a lot of misinformation to be spread. In the god-awful state of Texas, the Lubbock Lights incident were a series of weird formations of lights in the skies of Lubbock, Texas. Hundreds of reports were made around 30 lights in a V-shaped formation, kind of like the Phoenix lights, and meteorites, birds, and jet bombers were actually ruled out as what was seen didn't match any of those descriptions, and this incident was actually investigated by Edward J. Ruppelt, head of Project Blue Book. The Rendlesham Fort, it's British. 2 incidents on December 26 and December 28 in 1980 were known as Britain's Roswell, in which reports of strange lights were made near Rendlesham Forest near Suffolk, England. God damn it, England. At Raft Woodbridge, which was occupied by US Air Force at the time, there was a claim that strange lights fell into the nearby forest. Air Force personnel were then sent in to investigate. When they arrived though, to the crash site, they saw what was described as a glowing object with glowing lights flying away. The object then left 3 triangle-shaped impressions, burn marks, and broken branches. The second incident was reported as 3 bright lights in the sky that beamed down a stream of light from time to time for 2 to 3 hours, in which 2 days later, after the first incident, personnel investigated the site. And then arguments came out and said that this is just a fireball/meteor light from the Fortinus Lighthouse. I hope I said that right. But that was known to shine light into the forest, down Soviet spy satellite, or a hoax. Now it's known as the most famous UFO incident in the UK, and a UFO trail was made in the forest to commemorate the incident, with an artist piece at the end of the trail. Japanese pilots from Flight 1628 were carrying a wine shipment to Anchorage, Alaska, and said that on their way there, they were escorted by 2 UFOs that came up from below them. They were told that there were no military aircraft in the air, and pilots mentioned that no man-made aircraft could come up from under them, move at their exact speed, and then stop. Then after trying evasive maneuvers, the 2 objects would stop following, and then eventually they left, and then a third, bigger object came up and trailed them. The sighting lasted for about 50 minutes and was the first sighting to be spotted by ground and air traffic control. Actually, the main pilot here brought out his story to news channels all across Japan, and one specific incident, he did so, and he was pretty much fired from his job, and then they kind of brought him back, but they gave him a desk job, right? They fired him, then they demoted him, and then they just kind of fucked this guy over because he made a wild claim. At least 4 citizens reported a UFO over Tehran in 1976, and the UFO was described as flashing lights of blue, red, orange, and green, and the body of it wasn't identifiable. 2 Iranian fighter jets tried to open fire on strange lights in the sky, but as they approached the UFO, their weapons and their instrument panels malfunctioned. Only after they turned away from the UFO did their things start working again, and the UFO was said to have shot something at one of the jets, but nothing hit the jet, and nothing was found on the floor either. In 1966, 300 students and teachers at Westlaw High School in Australia reported seeing a gray and slightly purple UFO, and according to students, the UFO descended, flew over the high school, then disappeared behind trees, then reappeared 20 minutes later. The main explanation for this was that it was a weather balloon, but even then, that only explains the first half of this incident. And then, oddly enough, people that saw the UFO were instructed not to talk about it, which kind of brings a case of potential men in black. Majestic 12, or some people say Majestic 19, but Majestic 12 are a theory of an alleged group of scientists, military leaders, and government officials formed in 1947 by Harry S. Truman. They are said to be the ones who actually search for UFOs, while in the shadows. It's also claimed that they are the Men in Black, but that's not really confirmed. The FBI also came out and said that they're a bogus hoax, but you can't trust the FBI. The Kinross incident on November 23, 1953, two pilots named Felix Moncla and Robert Wilson were sent in to investigate a UFO over a restricted area at the Kinross Air Base. Moncla and Wilson eventually found the object and followed it, and on the radar, the pilots merged with the UFO. Like, it seemed like they were straight up swallowed by the UFO, because they were never seen again. And then there were multiple accounts of finding a crashed jet from this incident, but they were all ruled to be fake. And then oddly enough, there was a man who came out saying that he had the memories of Felix Moncla, and he was just Felix Moncla reincarnated, essentially. He got a documentary made on him, and that's just weird. In New Zealand's Kaikoura Mountains, I hope I said that right, goddammit, a cargo plane had observed quote-unquote house-sized lights around their aircraft. Reports mentioned the craft was large with 5 flashing lights, and some said that little discs started dropping from the craft, then disappeared. On the cargo plane's returning flight, though, they were accompanied by a TV crew in which they managed to record a bright orb in color, like the footage had color and everything. The explanations varied though, as some said this was boat lights, car lights, and one person quote-unquote said an unusually bright Venus. However, none of these have managed to convince the public. The Medellin Cube in February 2020 was a sighting in which a pilot passing through Medellin, Colombia, had apparently whipped out his phone, recorded how high he was, then aimed it at the sky. In doing so, he managed to capture a UFO passing through the sky. The object has only been identified as a cube, and there are theories saying that if this is an alien UFO, it's probably a probe. In Levelland, Texas, Texas again, large amounts of witnesses had reported a UFO in a short span of time, and the police station received multiple accounts with the same story essentially. Right, caller finds bright object, and car engine dies. The object was described as large and egg-shaped, and Project Blue Book actually got involved, and they started deeming this incident as just severe electrical storms, ball lightning, or St. Elmo's fire. But Donald Menzel, Majestic 12 member, had also been key in furthering the idea of electrical weather to downplay any sort of UFO hysteria. However, J. Allen Hynek of Project Blue Book had disputed these claims and said that no electrical storm happened during the time of these sightings. In 2004, Mexican Air Force recorded 11 UFOs in the state of Campeche. They were spotted during routine search for drug traffickers, and the UFOs then disappeared after they started getting chased. Explanations for this is that it was either flares, ball lightning, or a meteor deteriorating in the sky. And the pilots are actually very convinced of what they saw, and that they're convinced it was real. And one of them actually said that they knew they were being pursued.
Ahí se van a ver bien, pues. Y van a una velocidad, pero 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 en la pantalla.
Síguelo, no lo cierras.
¿Están a la misma altura Telles?
Afirmativo.
Poquito, arriba.
8, 9, 10, 11 contando toda la cola. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10.
The Falcon Lake incident is an incident in which the Canadian and American Air Force were sent in to investigate an alleged UFO sighting in Manitoba, Canada in 1967. A man known as Steve Michalik had spotted 2 cigar-shaped objects in the sky, and one landed near him. He then approached the object and tried to communicate with pilots he assumed were there, but got no response. Steve says that the object then turned around and blasted him with heated gas, which burned his clothes, and then this resulted in that picture. Stephenville, Texas again, dude, what the fuck? There's something wrong with Texas, I'm telling you. There's something wrong here. town of Stephenville had dozens of reports of a magic object with flashing strobe lights in the sky, and the UFO was said to move at about 3,000 miles per hour and be totally silent. Military explanations say that it was either F-16s that flew around the area or just commercial airplanes, but witnesses say that what they saw was way bigger. Everything's bigger in Texas, right? No. Betty and Barney Hill abduction and the first abduction case on the iceberg is the Hills had returned from their vacation from Niagara Falls and were abducted by aliens. Simple as that. After coming back from their abduction, they reported the incident to the US Air Force, and they didn't remember anything that happened to them until they received hypnotherapy. They then recovered their memories, and some of their memories, or actually most of their memories, all of their memories, were of gray alien beings, right? The generic gray alien. The biggest thing that came from this, though, is the star map, which was drawn by Betty herself, in which the star map similarly depicts the Zeta Reticuli constellation, which, if you know Bob Lazar, you probably know the Zeta Reticuli aliens. Weird connection. This case, though, had actually set the course for what most alien abduction story cases sounded like from here on, right? Being abducted by gray aliens, forgetting your memory, all those things. The generic alien abduction case, it all spawns from this one thing. I don't know if it's said, but I get the idea that this is where the origin of Zeta Reticuli aliens comes from, or that they're being aliens from this certain constellation. I think this is where it originates from. I can't tell yet. Philip J. Klass, also known as one of the biggest enemies of this channel, was a American journalist who was a big UFO skeptic who tended to argue in favor of most UFO sightings being hoaxes rather than actually having any sort of evidence for his accusation. Mostly, his biggest claims for these sightings being hoaxes was that people wouldn't take a polygraph test, so therefore he deemed it a hoax. I don't think that's the only way to go, but okay. On January 1948, Captain Thomas Mantell died crashing his P-15 Mustang after being sent to pursue a UFO, and the story that Project Sign, which was the precursor to Project Blue Book, went with was that Mantell died chasing a skyhook balloon at high altitudes, which led him to black out due to oxygen, or lack of oxygen, and sent him and his plane crashing all the way down. This incident had actually heightened concern about UFOs because someone had actually died chasing one, or at least with an encounter with one, and led people to believe that UFOs are not only alien but are potentially hostile. The Travis Walton incident is a abduction of a American forest worker who encountered a UFO and then reappeared 5 days later. Walton and a logging crew reported encountering a saucer-shaped object on the road, and Walton left the truck they were in, and a beam of light appeared from the object and knocked Walton unconscious. The others were terrified and drove away, which is kind of funny. They just kind of left him there. But Walton said he saw 3 short and bald creatures who he fought off along with other humans who he also saw with them, and those humans then put on a clear mask on him. He then proceeded to black out and forget everything until he found himself walking on a highway way later. Walton's actually accused of inspiring his story from the dramatization of the Hill abductions, and Travis Walton is actually on the Joe Rogan podcast who told his story right on there. So there's that. In 1994, 62 students from Ruwa, Zimbabwe claimed to see a silver aircraft descend from the sky in a field by their school while teachers were holding a meeting in the school. The students said creatures with big eyes dressed in black had came out and telepathically communicated a message to them, and later, when they went back inside, they told the teachers and were ignored, and skeptics have argued that this is just a case of mass hysteria. In 1980, Betty Cash and Vicki Landrum and her grandson Colby encountered a quote-unquote huge diamond-shaped object while driving home to Dayton, Texas. They saw a bright light twice and said it emitted heat from treetop levels, and they said that Helicopters approached and surrounded this object, and they all departed. All three had reported health problems similar to radiation sickness right after this, and this was actually a case that went to court, and Cash and Landrum sued the federal government for 20 million, but were dismissed. A UFO was seen at an airport in Aguadilla, Puerto Rico, splitting in two, and footage was captured of a UFO going 120 miles close to the ground and going into the water, then splitting. The US Congress has been urged to release more data on this incident because it's still unsolved, apparently. An incident that happened in the skies of Fargo, North Dakota. Pilot George Gorman had seen a Piper Cub plane below him and a second object to his west. After asking air traffic control if there was anyone else in the sky with him, and then he heard a no. Then after this, he pursued the object. Gorman described the object as a ball of light, and Gorman had said the object made many countermaneuvers that definitely had thought behind them, and finally dived at the object, like literally nose-dived kamikaze that shit, only for it to make a vertical climb up and finally lost sight of it. Pascagoula abduction was a alleged UFO sighting and the abduction of Charles Higginson and Calvin Parker in Pascagoula, Mississippi. Both Charles and Calvin were fishing on the west bank of Pascagoula River when they heard whirring noises, saw two flashing blue lights, and an oval-shaped object which was about 8 to 10 feet high. They claimed they were conscious but paralyzed when creatures with crab-like pinchers, robot-slit mouths, came and abducted them and were subjected to physical examinations. After going to the sheriff's department and being interviewed, investigators couldn't dismiss their story, but both men had actually passed polygraph tests, albeit by less experienced examiners, so people still are skeptical on this whole thing. The STS-48 incident in September 1991 was when the Space Shuttle Discovery deployed several satellites to conduct experiments, and in one of these videos from the mission, it shows what NASA deemed as ice particles flying across the thing. Skeptics took these as genuine UFOs, and I'm not gonna lie to you, this one's kind of fucking shit. It just keeps fucking showing up, but I think it's fucking shit. You know, I love this fucking story. You know what? I'm taking it back. 1952, not my favorite UFO sighting. It's this one. A Brazilian farmer's story of being abducted by 5-foot-tall aliens, and his fucking statements are wild. He says that a red star came from the sky, and 3 legs extended from it. Then he tried running away, but was captured. And then he was taken to a room with red symbols, covered in gel, and had blood samples taken from him. And then after that, they took him into another room and literally fucking gassed him. Then he says an attractive female alien with red pubes, I kid you fucking not, that's what he said, came in, and unlike Bill Clinton, he did have relations with the female. Like, I kid you not, they made an alien-human hybrid. Like, I at least tried. Boston stuck with this story, and it's just so fucking funny. Antonio Villas-Boas' story of his fucking UFO encounter is one of the best things I've ever seen. Sticking with fucking Brazil, an incident in the city of Varginha in Brazil. There's a fucking vagina joke in there somewhere. But this involved a series of strange creatures and one UFO being reported. One report came from 3 sisters and their friend, in which they saw a creature that was 5 foot tall and thin, a large head, V-shaped feet, brown skin, and large red eyes. They said it walked wobbly, assuming that it was sick or injured, and the 3 sisters told their mother that they saw the devil. I kid you fucking not, that's what it says. 2 days later, another creature was reportedly found lying on the road, and another similar sighting was reported by a zoo janitor. Rumors about the military capturing these creatures started spreading, and then the UFO was reported by farmers when their animals seemed agitated by an object hovering over them. Then Brazilian military actually said that the sisters had come across a homeless man named, or at least known as, Mulinho. I think that's just kind of funny. But no physical evidence was ever recovered, so this is just a skeptical incident. Potentially mass hysteria. The Val Johnson incident is the alleged UFO encounter by Sheriff Deputy Val Johnson in 1979 in Minnesota, the non-existent state of Minnesota. Deputy Johnson saw a beam of light up the road 3 to 4 feet off the ground, and then the light engulfed and damaged his car. And then Deputy Johnson had then become unconscious for 39 minutes. His wristwatch and vehicle clock stopped for 14 minutes and suffered injuries compared to welder burns. And professional buzzkill Philip J. Class accused Deputy Johnson of damaging his own car. The Korean War UFO was a reported UFO sighting by American soldiers in Seoul of South Korea, north of Seoul at least. They reported seeing a light make its way down to a village that was prepared to be bombarded by artillery, and then that this light would go in the middle of all the explosions and just remained unharmed. The light was said to go from orange to a pulsating blue-green, and then the soldiers had actually shot the object with an armor-piercing MI rifle round, and then it started acting quote-unquote erratically, and then started to make a metallic ding when they shot it. The UFO had then come towards them and quote-unquote attacked them, and it shone. It fucking did a light above them, and then as they hit the under bunkers, this thing shot off. Then after that, the soldiers had been evacuated with symptoms similar to radiation. Jesus Christ, I couldn't fucking explain that one. In 1965, in Valençol, France, a farmer named Maurice Mas, I hope I said that right, spotted an object coming from the sky and landed in a lavender field, and he assumed it was a unauthorized helicopter landing, and he went up to it. He saw an oval-shaped object with almost 4-foot tall figures, and one of these figures aimed a pencil-like object that paralyzed them for 20 minutes, and then they left in their UFO, leaving a deep hole with plants decaying in the area. Aurora, Texas, fucking Christ. A UFO crashed in the farm in April 17 of 1879, and the UFO is said to have hit a fucking windmill. The pilot is said to have died and reported not to be of this world, and it's also reported that the pilot was buried at a cemetery with Christian rites, and a historical marker was put, and then reportedly removed. The debris from the crash was said to have been buried under the damaged windmill, and some of it with the pilot or the alien. And that this, and it said that this story is actually just a hoax that was meant to bring interest to Aurora, which I believe it. Nobody wants to fucking go there. No wonder the fucking pilot died. He didn't want to be there. No one wants to be in Texas. An Australian pilot named Frederick Valentich disappeared during a training flight, and Valentich had reported being accompanied by another aircraft 1,000 feet above him, and that his engine started running roughly as he reported this. Having described the aircraft as a shiny metal surface and a green light, it began orbiting him, and then he then said, quote unquote, "It's not an aircraft," and then his transmission was interrupted by metallic scraping sounds, and his communication was lost. The investigation lasted about 20 years before closing due to no results, and explanations say that 1. He staged his disappearance, 2. He potentially ended his own life, and then 3. He just became disoriented due to light reflections in the water. However, UFO reports were made in Australia on the same night as this whole incident went down, and it's kind of worth noting that Valentich was a flying saucer enthusiast and was actually afraid of being attacked by them. In 1971, 16-year-old Ronald Johnson from Delphos, Kansas saw a glowing object hovering 2 feet off the ground near his family farm, and then went to get others. And then when he did that, the object disappeared. However, a glowing ring was found where the glowing object originally was, and Johnson had suffered temporary blindness due to the UFO's glow, and that the object had left a crystallized soil ring on the ground where it was said to have landed, or at least hovered over, but nothing conclusive has ever come out of this. UFOs were reported on 2 back-to-back nights hovering over Loring Air Force Base in Maine. No one lives in Maine, let's get real. Described as a cigar-shaped craft, they were spotted on radar, and the CIA had actually released documents about this situation 4 years later in 1975, in which it's believed that the aircraft came from Canada. Officials wrote, "It is our opinion that an unknown helicopter has demonstrated a clear intent in the weapons storage area, is smart, and a most capable aviator. Jesus Christ, I can't fucking read. This is actually known as one of the most bizarre cases during the Cold War. A report from Welsh police had said that an unusual aircraft was spotted in the sky and that the UFO reportedly attacked a police helicopter. The police had managed to avoid collision and proceeded to chase it, but it stopped because low fuel, and then the UFO escaped. The UFO was described as a flying saucer shaped and circled by flashing lights. And then the report had actually tried avoiding the term UFO, or unidentified flying object, or blurring thing in the sky. South Wales police had actively tried to downplay what happened by denying everything the helicopter crew had stated about the incident. Multiple shining lights were seen in the sky of Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico, and I'm not gonna lie to you, I first found this video like years ago, but like now I just can't fucking find it. The shining objects were seen to fly in massive formations, and the actual number is said to be somewhere in the hundreds, and among them was a much bigger disc-shaped craft, seemingly controlling all of them. And I don't know what it is, but like YouTube, like search or whatever, has like completely fucked UFO sightings, or at least anything regarding this situation, because you can't find shit on YouTube anymore. Like UFO sightings, UFO caught on camera, whatever the fuck you want to put. It just gives you like Watch Mojo, fucking History Channel, the Pentagon videos, and fucking Jeremy Corbell. I fucking hate his face. I don't know. I don't hate Jeremy Corbell. It's just I've seen him too much now that I hate his fucking face. I don't know. They're probably hiding something. I don't fucking know. 14 children, about 10 years old, all had encountered a UFO. And students at the Broadhaven Primary School had said that they spotted a UFO in the playground, and teachers didn't believe any of the students, and they eventually separated all of them and had them draw what they saw, and then the students all draw the same thing, a similar cigar-shaped craft with a humanoid pilot wearing silver. Nothing has ever been concluded, and the government had actually started investigations in secret but led to nothing. And then this one thing, one local businessman said to have dressed up in silver and just walked around, and he did this as a prank. Like he literally just did this as a prank. First shown by Secure Team 10. You remember that guy? I love that guy. I love this channel before the whole thing happened. A cigar-shaped object was spotted over Paris, and then this object was actually reported to have been seen prior in China and Australia years before. Tyler of Secure Team 10 had not been able to find the original source and wondered if it was a hoax. But the thing about this is that it actually made its way to Fox News. Fucking wild. President Jimmy Carter, while being governor of Georgia, right before he was president, he had seen a UFO in the sky and had actually reported it 4 years after the incident had happened. And here, he said he was waiting for a meeting with 10 others outside, and then they saw a bright light that changed colors about the size of the moon in the sky, and that the object was said to have moved closer to Earth and then zoomed off. And then he stated, quote unquote, the darndest thing he ever saw. Sticking with the presidents, Ronald Reagan, before being president, while being governor of California, Ronald Reagan has seen a UFO on a flight to Bakersfield, and in this incident, he said that a bright white light was seen flying fairly steadily and accelerated. After that, it elongated and took off in a 45-degree angle. And then Reagan had actually reported this incident to a Wall Street Journal chief, and he then noticed that he was saying this to a journalist, and then he quote-unquote clammed up and never spoke of this incident again. A video taken by fishermen from Galicia, Spain. The video is said to be, by commenters, one of the best videos ever taken, and I don't know if that's fucking sarcasm or if it's genuine. But as of right now, I can't find the fucking origin of this video, but it's just, I don't know, it's so funny. All I can find though is that it's from 2009, and people don't think that CGI was good enough to be able to fake this at that time. So there's that. An incident in which a UFO left physical evidence in a form of burnt residue in a field on January 8, 1981 in France. A saucer-shaped object had been reported to be around 8 feet tall, and the man who reported it was Renato Nicolai, there we go. Renato Nicolai, there we go, got his fucking name right. He said that the object took off immediately once he saw it to the northeast and left burn marks where it sat, and then Nicolai had believed it to be a experimental aircraft. However, no conclusion has been made on how the physical evidence came to be. There we go. There are 4 different accounts of objects in the sky being sometimes called phantom ships or gleaming lights that were reported between 2014, no, not 2014, 214 BC to 196 AD. There we go. Citizens reported seeing glowing objects that fought amongst themselves, and the reported objects were spheres, crosses, globes, moons, and tubes. A sighting of a large black triangular object preceded the fight, and then these spheres started falling to Earth in a cloud of smoke. The incident was then commemorated, and then 5 years later, a similar incident happened again in Basel, Switzerland. The Book of Ezekiel is essentially the origin of the ancient astronaut theory, in which Ezekiel the priest had said, and I quote, "As I looked, behold, a stormy wind came out of the north, and a great cloud, with brightness around it, and fire flashing forth continually, and in the midst of the fire, as it were gleaming metal. And from the midst of it came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had human likeness." The book of Ezekiel was an Old Testament book, and the Old Testament is where God once killed a man for not impregnating his dead brother's wife. However, some believe that Ezekiel was speaking about UFOs and aliens, making this essentially a biblical UFO sighting. An alleged alien encounter by an Italian night watchman in which he claimed to be abducted 11 times. Pierre Zanfretta spotted a red oval object and 3 9-foot-tall beings with green spotted skin, thorns, yellow triangular eyes, and clawed feet that he apparently ran into. I kid you not, this motherfucker ran into some reptilians. Fucking finally. Goddamn. He then reported that what he saw were not men, and he was then found unconscious. Later, under hypnosis, Zanfretta stated that he was abducted and taken into a bright room in their craft. And now, for the last one, let's give you the first one. What a way to end it. A 35,000-year-old document that is the first reported UFO sighting. It's known as the Tully Papyrus. I hope I'm saying that right. I didn't bother to check the pronunciation, but it's a transcription of a Egyptian written document that, once translated, had mentions of fiery discs and circles of fire. It's actually extremely debated since Alberto Tulli, the Vatican Museum director, who had found the original transcript, is actually accused of copying the document after seeing it once and then putting a lot of translation errors. Now we're at the end. Look, I changed my shirt like 3 times. If you're still here, thank you for everything. Like every other iceberg, I make it myself, so this was fucking hell. That's it for me. I hope you enjoyed, and bye.